Hi, Nick Collier here. It's early March 2011. This series is called Jewelry Tricks. This segment, Chevy Bumpers. The Chevy Bumpers series, as you'll be seeing here in a second, is the series of bars that go across the front of the piece. And we're going to just keep moving into different pieces here. And you can see that, for me, it kind of looks like, and in fact this next piece is going to really give it to you. It looks like, well, not Chevy bumpers by any means, but maybe an old Pontiac grill or something like that. These are all pieces in sterling. Here's coming up is a piece that's not quite finished yet with a garnet. And you can see that, once again, that motif in the bars has a nice flavor to it. This piece here is a gigantic piece, and I did this in sterling, probably 10 or 15 years ago. I knew it wouldn't sell, but I was on the streets selling at craft shows, and I needed a piece to draw people from across the street, and so I would put this piece up on a pedestal so that they could see it. Now, to start this series, I need a fairly thick piece of gold, and I don't have anything thick enough, so I've gone into my scrap bin here, and all of the scrap that comes out of the shear, and I'm going to put that in a crucible, and then we're going to take it over to the torch and heat it up. So one important thing when re-smelting any metal really is to have a neutral flame, and a neutral flame, and really you can hear it, and that's a carbonized flame, which means it has too much gas in it, and there's a big yellow fan shooting out. But as we add more and more oxygen, that yellow comes back further and further until you get to just where there's just a little bit of yellow right on the tip. If you go too far, then you have too much oxygen in the flame, and that will cause porosity in your melt. Okay, first thing we have to do is heat the crucible up, because the crucible is really the whole thing, the thing that maintains the heat in the gold as you're trying to pour it. And if the crucible's too cold, then the pour won't be a decent pour. The gold will cool off before it comes out of the crucible. So we'll just go in and kind of gently warm up the crucible. And while we're here doing this, we can kind of come over and look at the mold that I'm going to pour into, or the receiver. And it's basically going to be a long triangular affair here. And you can see that all that scrap's starting to heat up nicely. And it's just getting ready to start melting. And you can see now that the gold is starting to melt down pretty good. It's far from getting ready to pour, but we're beginning to get everything solidified and in a place where we can use it. I'll just keep heating and heating. Okay, I'm going to pull the torch away for a second, and you're going to look in there and see this molten mass of gold. And the gold is really getting very close to ready to pour. So it's time to put a little bit of flux on it. And the flux basically gives it, kind of cleans the metal. It's like a real high temperature soap. And we're going to try to come in here so you can see it at the same time we pour. Okay, we'll try it from that angle. The gold is very molten. It's almost liquid now. And you'll see it when it goes into the receiver. Okay, here it goes. And that, as they say, is that. The metal pretty much solidifies almost instantly, mainly because the block is cold, and it takes it right to a solid state. Let's see what that looks like. And you can see there's a nice big sheet of gold there. It's probably maybe 1/8 of an inch across or so. We're going to have to dig that out because this thing gets stuck. Well, there we go. I can pull it out. There we go. Plunk. One huge sheet of gold. Probably weighs about 2 ounces at this point. Cool it off, and we're ready to go to work with it. Okay, the gold is way too thick for what we need, probably twice or 3 times too thick. So we're going to roll this metal down a little bit so we've got the right thickness. So just keep opening it up until we get to where the metal can go through, and then crank it closed just a little bit, and the metal just slides right through. It makes the metal thinner. The rolling mill does, and also makes it longer. You really can't quite see it yet, but you'll see it soon enough. There. So it's probably about 1/2 inch longer at this point. It's a little bit thinner. Now we've run it through 3 times, and the gold starts to become brittle at this point because there's a lot of alloys in 14 karat gold. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go over to the torch and anneal the piece of metal again so that the molecules can relax. Okay, it's pretty simple here. We're just going to heat the metal up until it comes to temperature, and the metal actually, the molecules in the metal just kind of relax and allow the metal to stretch further. In a sense, you could do this forever. It's said that you could take a square inch of gold, pure gold. Now this isn't pure gold, but you could take a square inch of pure gold and continue to roll it out by doing this annealing process on a regular basis to almost a square mile. Okay, you can see now that we're starting to get nice and red hot. We're at probably 900 or 1,000 degrees. I'm going to turn the light out for a second. Whoa, there you go. Now it's starting to... So we're just dropping the temperature slowly. Now the reason why it's going slowly is because it's a pretty thick piece of metal. So it's got a lot to go with. Now with steel and brass and all these other metals, you can't really do this with. But gold and silver you can. You have to, you can just punch it. I'll turn the light back on. You just put it in water, and what happens is the molecules stay relaxed. Now with with steel, the molecules tighten up again, so you have to let steel relax very slowly. Once again, back in the rolling mill, close it up a little bit, rotate it around, and it spits out a little bit longer piece, a little bit thinner. There's the second pull, a little bit longer, a little bit thinner. There's the third pull. Notice how it was really difficult for me to get that pull to happen because it is the third one and the metal is starting to solidify. So we're going to go ahead and just do the same thing again, anneal it. Okay, one more time, except this time, and I've been running it through this direction, but now I want to run it through in the width direction because I need to get a little bit more width out of the piece. So we're going to run it through the mill that doesn't have any grooves in it, which is a whole separate machine, and that should take us to just making it slightly wider. was easy. Next one's going to be a little bit harder. But you can see it's already starting to widen it up. And then the next one's going to be the really hard one. Okay. Back to the rolling, or back to the annealing process. Okay, our thickness is getting fairly close to where I want it to be, but I need a little bit more width out of this, so I think I'll run it through a couple of more times and then we'll call it a day. Yeah, that widened it up nicely. So just one more time. See what happens. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so now we go back and anneal it again because it needs to be a little softer. And before we anneal this last piece here, this last time, which will be the third time we're annealing, I want to talk about the welding bench in general. And you can see that my welding bench is, it's not the cleanest thing in the world, but it is a welding bench. And I have a piece of stone here, and then a piece of asbestos, well, not asbestos, but a kind of a tile here, and then a Lazy Susan so I can rotate the thing fairly easily, and then a pumice block on top of that. And then sometimes I bring in a charcoal block to do more accurate work. Now the most important part about a welding bench is that you have a hood. And you can see this hood if we open it, bring it up. Let me turn a light on here. There's the hood. And the more important piece is to have a good ventilator. And I've got a good 6-inch pipe there that's sucking the gas out. Because if you don't suck the gas out, it's going to get in your face and you're going to breathe it. And if you're working with gold, more often than not, the alloys, the other 50% that's not gold, are heavy metals. And they won't bother you now, they won't bother you in a week or a month. But in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, many jewelers come up with emphysema and other related diseases because they've been taking in these heavy metals all those years. So good ventilation system is very important. I like to put my acid in the ventilation area too, because sometimes the acids will smoke. Like say if you put the metal in a little bit hot, it'll smoke the acid a little bit. Best to draw it out. All right, now that the metal's annealed and rolled down, you can see it's just got a little bit of a twist to it, but we'll take that out later. So now we just put it up against the stop along the back side of this, which is exactly 90 degrees from the edge of the cutting blade, and we can just run it in. Well, in this case we can't run it in, so we got to just come up with a little spacer. Okay, well, how about a nice little 5/16 cobalt lathe bit? It's very square, it's got a good clean edge, everything's fairly accurate, and I can slide it up against there, and now I can get the piece of metal underneath the blade. So if we can set this down here, I can take the first cut. Now it's a pretty heavy piece, but it cut pretty well. So we got a nice square cut now. Our first edge cut, and now we're going to come in and take out the second edge, which is going to give us our first segment. And we come in with a 90-degree protractor and just mark the piece with a scribe. All right, so we've got that little line scribed in there, and that's going to give us our width. Okay, first cut, you can look down on it and you can see it didn't quite come out square, but it's just how the shear is. It doesn't cut a good square edge. You can see that edge there. I always make it a little bit wider so I can trim it back anyhow, so it's not that big a deal. All right, next cut. We've got our line. It's at 90 degrees, knowing that it's not going to cut at 90, but we'll set the 90 up anyhow. Pull it down. And there's our second segment. 2 segments so far. Okay, here comes our third segment. Get the protractor in there. Figure out the width. Get the protractor in there. Scratch our next line. Okay, we've gotten 5 pieces out of this one piece of metal, and that should be a really good start for what we're trying to do. Okay, there's our 5 pieces. Now basically I just take a measurement from one of them, and it looks like we're at 950 thousandths, so half of that would be 475, right? I believe. And then I just strike a line at 475 on both sides. And that's going to give me my center point on this piece of metal. Same thing. Do it on both sides to make sure. And just keep doing striking lines until I get to where I want to go. Till I get all 5 of them done. And there's the 5th one coming up. Now, striking the cross line is going to be a little more difficult, because, not more difficult, but somewhat, because each one of them I'm going to have to measure. So this one happens to be 300 thousandths wide, so if I go to 150 thousandths right there, I should be halfway. And so what I'm trying to do is find my center point of each piece. And you can kind of see that I found it. All right, each one of these is marked. Now I come into those little cross markings and carefully set this punch on it and just hit a little tap on each one. And since I don't have the right size piece of round gold, I'm going to go ahead and cut myself a small piece here. What is it, about 4 or 5 inches long? And we're going to run that through the draw plate and get a smaller piece, so that, or I mean thinner piece, so that it'll work with the design that I'm wanting to build. Okay, so I know it's going to be hard to hear in here, but at this point, what I'm really doing is just pencil sharpening the end of the piece of round material. Okay, we're out in the shop, because that's the only place where I have a big vise, which is what I'm going to need with this pieces, because we're going to be pulling pretty heavily on this. I take a little bit of beeswax and go ahead and coat the surface of the wire as a lubricant, and then take the pliers, and you can see that the tongs have a little serrated edge on the inside, or cross hatching, and that's so you can grab onto the metal and pull it through. And in this case it pulled right through, so we need to go to the next size smaller. Now the next size smaller isn't going to be that easy, because this is a big piece of wire.